Welcome to Insights in Touch, the podcast where industry insight meets meaningful conversation. Hosted by Kristin Thorne, this series, presented by iFraud Foundation, explores the real issues facing the property and casualty insurance world. It's the pulse of an industry under pressure and the voices working to protect its future. Stay informed, stay connected, stay in touch. Now, here's your host, Kristin Thorne.
On the Insights in Touch podcast today, we are very honored to have the Commissioner of the Louisiana Department of Insurance, Tim Temple. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on your program.
Tim, first I want you to take everybody through, what does it look like? What does the insurance landscape look like right now in Louisiana?
Yeah, well, first, Kristin, I think it's important for everybody to understand that, and you hear it said a lot, but insurance is a promise to pay. And that's exactly what the business model is built around. And unfortunately, that you have some marketplaces like Louisiana where it's been allowed to expand beyond paying reasonable claims, just claims, fraud being a big, component of that. And fraud is not a victimless crime. But in Louisiana, we're now paying some of the highest, if not the highest, premiums for our auto coverage as well as for our property. And on the property side, we certainly have some justification for that with the result of 4 hurricanes within a 12-month, 2-day period, over 800,000 property claims during that time period. So, we had a massive catastrophic event there, which justified some of the rates going up. But then we saw after the claims started coming in that you had groups like the law firm over in Houston. They were harvesting claims. They were paying money to marketing firms just to give them a name and a phone number of someone who had a claim so that they could contact them to litigate. So it created, insurance companies ended up paying more than their fair share on claims. On the auto side, like I said, we've been paying some of the highest auto premiums in the country for decades, especially in the commercial industry. And again, it's not because in Louisiana, our vehicles are any more expensive to repair than the national average. It's not that we have any more accidents on a frequency basis than the rest of the nation. It's when you start digging into the numbers, we have twice the number of bodily injury claims and twice the number of litigations filed. So what's the magic, what's the driver behind that? And I think that's some of the reform that we've passed recently in the last 2 years since I've been elected commissioner to tackle some of these drivers, cost drivers.
Yeah, Tim, look, you bring up a great point. When you look at this stuff as a reasonable person, how is it that Louisiana has all of these bodily injuries and the premiums are going up? It's just to your point. It's not that Louisiana drivers are bad drivers. I mean, come on, New York, we have some of the most aggressive drivers in the country. It's because there is something else going on. It's not that the cars are bad in Louisiana. Again, it's not that you have bad drivers. It's pointing to something. And that's the point, that there is something else that is causing this incredible influx of claims in Louisiana, and it's not because of these other factors. It's because of fraud.
Yeah, and Kristin, let me give you an interesting stat, and we're using NAIC data. In the last year where the books are closed, everything, all the claims have been resolved. There's no open litigation, anything like that. 2021, the state of Louisiana had 66,000 bodily injury claims. And our population is somewhere around 4.4 million people. So 66,000 claims. Could be a lot, could be, a large ratio, could be a small. Start to compare it. Alabama, our friends, just 2 states over to the east, 5 million people in their state. That's their state population. 34,000 bodily injury claims. Your great state of New York, right? 19 million people. 60,000 bodily injury claims, 6,000 less in the state of Louisiana, 5 times the population, and about 10% less bodily injury claims than we had in our state. That's a big problem. It's a massive problem because, as you and I think your viewers know, when you have bodily injury claims, there's additional cost associated with it, with the medical component. And then again, in Louisiana, when you file twice the national average of litigation on those bodily injury claims, there's that additional cost. So we know what the cost drivers are in the state. We just have to have the political willpower to tackle some of the big, some of the big industries making a lot of money in this business.
And what I think it is, and as I've been investigating this now for almost 2 years, I feel that these claims seem to come, and it's probably what's happening in Louisiana, that eventually the word gets out there, right? It's human nature. The word gets out there that there's a way to make a quick dollar. And it's what we see in New York when we have dozens of plaintiffs living in a 2-story home. I believe what's happening is, right, this makes sense. One person does this. They say, hey, you can make a lot of money. Do this or call this lawyer. And then all of a sudden, there's this flooding in of claims from the same group of people. I think what's happening in Louisiana is you guys are having this on a large scale. It's kind of gotten out there that this is a really great way to make money.
Well, look, Kristin, in Louisiana, it is extremely evident that the advertising for this type of business has run rampant. In our state, you cannot drive, I dare say, half a mile, down any major highway without being bombarded with, billboard after billboard after billboard. If you sit and watch TV in our state for 30 seconds, you're going to see advertising attorneys, messaging on television. We have 2 attorneys in our state that they're currently competing for market share in the city of New Orleans. And one of the local newspapers interviewed both of them, and they both admitted to spending over, or they said up to around $25 million each per year in advertising. I mean, that's and that's just 2 we've got probably 7 to 10 really big advertising type attorneys. You don't do that because you're just hoping you're going to get business. I mean, you do that because, look, these guys, they're smart attorneys, and I'd say they're probably smarter businessmen. And, when you advertise, you're expecting an ROI. And if you're spending $25 million on advertising a year, you've got a pretty big ROI. So, but that's what it's prevalent in our state. And people, and another thing, Kristin, we're a poor state. We've got a large population of men and women and families that are below, at the poverty level, if not below. You get in a minor fender bender, and if you got this promise, you see this promise on TV or a promise on a billboard that if you just call them, they're going to get you the most money, the maximum amount of money. I mean, a lot of people that could double your income, in 1 year. So I think that we've got to think about what that messaging is to, who's being targeted and how that's being received. And I don't know what the solution there is, but fraud is not a victimless crime. Right. I mean, if someone is receiving more than they should have, then somebody else has got to pay for that. And that's the rest of the, that's
which
that's
is
the rest
people
of the people
who are
out there.
abiding by the rules. But Tim, you also bring up a good point. So here in New York, primarily we are seeing these fraudulent claims come from vulnerable Spanish immigrants and migrants. Mm-hmm. It's the same idea. New York was the epicenter of where the migrants came. And so there has been an explosion in New York City between 21, 22, 23 of these fraud claims. Why? Because of all of a sudden, these lawyers and doctors had a pool of people that they could go through. And we really believe, and I believe, that many of these people have no idea what they're getting themselves into. They don't know how to file a lawsuit. They barely speak English. So we don't fault them, because we understand when you are desperate and you need to feed your family, you will do things that maybe you don't really understand. The problem is there are people who do understand, and they're the ones manipulating them. I think, Tim, tell me a little bit about this tort reform package you guys have. This is huge. I mean, there are so many things in this package that I love. One of them is the comparative fault. This would bar drivers responsible for at least 51% of an accident from receiving a damage award to cover their injuries. I just think this is great.
Yeah, and Kristen, this package of bills on tort reform, I like to say legal reform. I'm not an attorney. Most people, despite the number of billboards and advertising you see in our state, most people still aren't attorneys in our state. But so they don't understand the legal component. So I say legal reform or legal abuse reform. But in Kristen, it's interesting. Like I said, I was elected and came into office in January of 2024. And after our first regular session in 2024, starting in June of last year, the House and Senate leadership uh, had four committees start to meet to talk about insurance premiums and what the drivers were. And it was the House and Senate insurance committees, and then our House Civil Law and Senate Judiciary A. And those four committees met a total of 14 times over a 6-month period, 7-month period. And we started getting and really getting into the meat of the problem. As I said earlier, the cost drivers, and that's where it started to come to light. Like I said, our cars aren't anymore, expensive to repair. The frequency of that. We started really honing in on those bodily injury claim numbers and litigation numbers and all of these factors. And from those 14 committee hearings, that's when we started formulating our package of bills, looking at Louisiana. What can we do? Look, every state has its own unique distinctions and why it might want to do something one way versus another from another state. But when you really start looking at things that make sense, common sense, one of them was the modified comparative fault. 34, I think it's 34 other states have modified comparative fault. Why don't we do something? Because it does address that, a propensity to claim bodily injury, to introduce the ability to, maybe you don't even know you're committing insurance fraud or thinking about it. But, most of my fellow citizens understand if I cause the accident, if I run into you, why should I be able to sue you and recover? It makes common sense. And so that was a really good bill. Representative Emily Chenevere was the author of that bill. She is a strong champion for insurance reform, legal reform, trying to bring those cost drivers down so that the premiums will follow. And I need to say, Kristen, we've got a lot of good legislators that understand that they have a good grasp of the insurance industry. You can't you can't mandate. You can't legislate rate decreases. It doesn't work that way. The industry is still a free market, as it should be, because that's the best. I'm a free market capitalist, and I think that's the it works in other states, and that's what we need to continue to do. So we're going to continue to promote common sense legislation, and that one was a good bill. Emily Chenevere was a great champion for that bill, and I'm really proud, and I'm excited to see what that does in our marketplace.
Because again, Tim, it comes down to the Louisiana taxpayer. Everybody is paying for this.
That's right. The Louisiana ratepayer is paying for this on the insurance side for sure. And, so that, like I said, that was a good bill. We had, golly, I'm trying to think right now. We increased the threshold for no pay, no play. I think that one will have some impact. I hear, one of the things in Louisiana that as I travel the state and I do town halls, a lot of people are concerned with the uninsured rate, uninsured motorist rate in our state. And everything that I see doesn't point that we have a problem there. We're right around, if not just below the national average of uninsured drivers on the road. Where Louisiana has a problem is in our underinsured drivers. It's those that carry, minimum limits. And obviously, if you look at the minimum limits in Louisiana versus what the average cost of a used car, there's a gap there. And so it's not an uninsured problem in our state. It's an underinsured. But this particular bill I'm talking about, it raises the threshold. If you don't carry insurance and you're involved in an auto accident, you can't recover the first 100,000. Now that doesn't
from 15,000.
It was 15. It's now 100,000. And like I said, I think it's leaning in the right direction, but I don't see that as a major mover, as far as reducing any type of frivolous or fraudulent type claims.
Right. But that's just, there's nothing worse if you know people or you have been in an accident with an uninsured or underinsured driver. It's just a nightmare. I'm teaching my son this now, who's learning how to drive, he's like, well, if we have to have insurance, why doesn't everybody have to have insurance? And I said, exactly. That's the
Common
point.
sense. Right.
Common sense. These teenagers, sometimes they just get it. Yes. And I think another thing, Tim, I'd like to make sure people understand is that no one is saying that there aren't valid claims, that there aren't people who are legitimately hurt. That is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about fraud and people who have taken advantage of the system for far too long. And this is why insurance companies are starting to finally say enough is enough. But for so many years, insurance companies paid out and settled. And now it's hit a point where it's just too much. Tim, what else? Any closing thoughts? What else? What is your hope here? What do you want to see happen, especially in Louisiana?
Well, and Kristin, something you just mentioned too is, all these laws that we're changing, these bills that we're asking the legislature to pass and the governor to sign, it does not threaten anyone that has a legitimate claim. And I think it's important that we keep messaging that. And I appreciate you pointing that out. If you're, like I say, if it was truly an accident and it was not your fault, and you have, the bodily injury, physical damage to your car, lost wages, true things that you can truly you can measure and compensate for. That's what insurance is designed to address. It's not to make you better. As I say, it doesn't mean that if you wreck your Ford, you get a Ferrari. And in Louisiana, it seems like that is starting to occur, occurs quite frequently, not just on the car itself, but on the, again, the monetary compensation that you receive. You get so much more back than what you're out. And so we've got to fix that. And whether it's fraud or frivolous, that's what these laws are designed to do, is to rebalance and bring fairness. And I don't use fairness lightly because I don't like that word, but it is designed to bring a sense of fairness or balance back into the system. And so that's what I'm always going to do as Commissioner of Insurance is to continue to promote regulation and legislation that protects the consumer, the consumer that truly has, that's on the right side of that claim, and not to help people game the system. And that's what we do. That's the laws that we're passing. That's the way I regulate. Because again, I understand this is a competitive marketplace. Capital goes where it's welcome and where it's going to be treated fairly. And by fairly, that doesn't mean it's not going to be exposed to risk. It just means when it is exposed to risk, that the insurance company is going to have a better sense that they're going to pay fair claims and just claims and not excessive. And so we keep promoting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. And those claims will get covered faster. That's what people need to understand. Right now, the systems are so bogged down with fraud that insurance companies, you have to understand it. It makes sense. They can't they're questioning everything that comes in. So if you have a legitimate claim, you're being slowed down immensely. That's why, like you're doing in Louisiana, addressing the fraud will speed up settlements for people who deserve them.
Yeah. Well, and look, it certainly will. And I think that's one thing that we haven't talked about, Chris, just kind of in closing, is that in Louisiana, we are leaning forward on identifying fraud or frivolous type claims. We've now had two major fraud rings, auto accident rings that we have been part of the Department of Insurance in working with Louisiana State Police and with the Attorney General's office to identify and go after. And we need to do more of that because, again, these laws help encourage and promote that type of bad behavior. So, we're going to continue to promote that. We've got a task force with those two groups I just mentioned. We're going to lean forward into that because just like I know in New York, and I know y'all have had some of the rings that have recently been busted for that type of activity. It cost us as citizens, as ratepayers, a lot on that. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to lead through the Department of Insurance, working with our fellow agencies there. And, we got to do everything we can because, the insurance companies, as the claims mount, they just pass the cost on to us as consumers. That's every business model. That's what you do. And I think too, Kristin, a thought, and I've said this before in some other public conferences I've done. I think the insurance industry needs to do a better job of promoting how its business model works and what it's supposed to do. I'm of the age where I remember, watching there was the Prudential, the Rock, Hartford, the Big Mountain and Travelers, and the Umbrella. The message that you received back then was protection, financial security. That's not the message that the insurance industry, that's not their marketing anymore. I'm not even going to get into what all they do on their marketing.
No, you're right.
Stand it. But the advertising attorneys have taken that. If
right.
you watch, especially in our state, if you watch what their message to the consumer is, if you've been involved in a wreck or whatever, we'll bring you, financial security and that peace of mind, and we'll take care of you. That's what they're messaging. They're using the insurance company's money against them. And I keep talking, I keep saying every chance I get in front, to get in front of any insurance executives, I'm like, guys, please go sit down with your marketing companies or departments and think about what you're messaging. Birds and lizards and jingles and all this stuff is not doing it. You got to change this. And it took a long time to get to where we are. So it's going to take a long time to get back, but they've got to start, and they need to start educating people on what insurance, what it's for, how it operates. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's not, look, I've seen people now advertising or marketing and listen to this, Kristin. Their message is, do you know that sometimes you go years before you use your insurance premium? It's like,
yikes.
They message it like it's almost like it's an investment.
Right.
And again, I think it's a missed opportunity where, and I say it, insurance is something that you hope you never, ever use. It's a premium you pay that you hope you never see back, because if you do, that means something bad has happened. And you and I and a lot of people in the industry understand that, but the average consumer doesn't. And it's real easy to fall into that mindset of, I paid my premium, I didn't use it, why don't I get that money back? I mean, I've seen elected officials make those kind of statements before in our state, in my state. That's not what
they need a little
does.
lesson. Yeah.
So we need more
lesson.
insurance literacy.
No, totally. I absolutely agree. I think that is something you are spot on, and I'm really glad you brought that up. Tim Temple, Commissioner of the Louisiana Department of Insurance, thank you so much for joining us on the Insights in Touch podcast.
Thank you so much. I hope I get the opportunity to do it again.
I would love it. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.